1939 was a big year for William Saroyan's future earnings. His biggest cash cows were being created, even if the major landslide of money wasn't quite happening yet. My Heart's in the Highlands and The Time of Your Life would be produced for the first time, though Saroyan would make far more money on those properties in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s on their productions and adaptations. He was selling stories left and right. He was making good money, and it's clear he was set for continued income streams. One of the biggest eventual cash cows was created as Saroyan and his cousin, Ross Bagdasarian, were driving across the U.S. following the initial run of The Time of Your Life. With so much free time on their hands, the music-minded Ross and the lyric-minded William bounced ideas off one another. One of them was taking an Armenian tune and putting an Armenian persona poem of a lonely immigrant boy who was using a cornucopia of fresh fruits and candies to woo a young lady. The two of them put together a song in English, somewhat broken English, which made the song feel as if it were being sung by a recent arrival. The target of the wooing was a U.S. #1 girlie. Saroyan described the song as funny, sad, and beautiful. In a letter to Abel Green of Variety, Saroyan mentioned the creation and that this was not the only song they composed. We were driving from New York to Fresno, and we began to invent songs of all kinds. Some of the others we invented we forgot on the spot. One of them was called Automobile, Automobile, but as I say, we forgot it. We liked this one enough to make a point of not forgetting it, and before we had gone 60 miles, we had both committed it to memory. He mentioned the song in letters to Pat Duggan, and it was a favorite when Ross and Bill would be at parties where a piano was present. William wrote it down eventually, most famously on a trio of napkins now in the collection of Forever Saroyan. The song was not published or even recorded at the time, but they kept it in mind. In 1950, when Ross was to direct William's play The Sun, they included it in the play, but William wasn't sure it would be a good idea. At a party at the home of Una and Charlie Chaplin, Ross sang the song for all those gathered, and they declare it was good fun. The song was published by Duchess Publishing, and in 1951 came to the attention of Rosemary Clooney's producers. Clooney recorded it, and it became a nationwide hit, including going to the coveted #1 position on the Billboard Hot 100. That made both Ross and William a good deal of money. And, as was Saroyan's typical practice, he tried to find a way to turn one success into several. Thus, he wrote a treatment for a film based around the song and sent it around to Hollywood producers. Having gone through the process of shopping around The Time of Your Life in 1946 and 47, he began making contact. Mostly, these were cold calls, though apparently it started with two teams. 20th Century Fox, through producer Sam Engel, and the team of Jerry Weld and Norman Krasna, who had a distribution deal through RKO Radio Pictures. Wald had been the producer who Ben Medford had focused on in the initial phase of landing a movie deal for The Time of Your Life. Wald had a series of hits in the years after that attempt for The Time of Your Life, most notably Key Largo and The Glass Menagerie. The first contact with the RKO team shows that Saroyan was very much going in blind. You may have heard a song called Come On to My House on the radio. This song was written by Ross Bagdasarian and myself. The song, at the present moment, is the nation's #1 hit. There is a story implicit in the song itself. Since this is so, Ross and I, and Archie Manassian, have discussed a very simple story based upon the idea of the song and the people we have known in Fresno. Saroyan goes on to say that he hadn't written a script, but had put together a 5-page treatment. The treatment was scant, and not at all plot-heavy. In fact, later in his initial letter, he said that what you have here is a general idea only. I know that a plot is not here, but I think there is enough to start things going, if you like the idea. The treatment is a fascinating example of Saroyan's craft, and clearly influenced by his cousins, Archie and Ross. While Willie's names for characters could get a little strange, Ross and Archie's characters often went beyond. Here, the main character is Ara Karagosian, a very standard Armenian name. Ara's neighbor? Profe Californazzi, an incredibly strange name, and much like those used in Archie stories. Famously, Archie Crash Cup. There's also a bakery owner, Jazier Shabtach, a Armenian Russian who owns the Old Country Bakery. Ara is a very Saroyan character. He is a young immigrant who works at the Old Country Bakery and likes to turn the empty lots around his tiny house into veritable jungles of grapevines, trees, and vegetables. He's an orphan, and his only family is the Armenian community of Fresno. Profe, a choir teacher who has a European education, is greatly admired by Ara, who writes his own sad Armenian songs and cuts them to records. He is an opera singer as well. Jazier is a man of strong temper, but also great humor and generosity at times. These can certainly be mapped, at least broadly, to people in the cousins' lives. Archie's brother Zav seems to share a lot in common with Profe, at least as far as being an opera singer and musician. Jazier certainly shares a lot with the trio's uncle, and main influence in their life, Aram Saroyan, who was also the basis for Uncle Khosrow in Saroyan's My Name is Aram. There is a girl named Marianne Bidigari. She's one of the customers who comes to the bakery and is also the one, eventually, Ara sings Come On to My House to as a part of the movie. The treatment notes that there will be many other characters, mostly customers of the bakery, and they will take up a significant portion. This actually seems to be fairly similar to Saroyan's own short film, The Good Job, and its retinue of characters serving as the prime movers for what passed as a story. Of course, despite not having figured out the muddle in the middle, the treatment gives us the ending. The upshot of the whole story must be, of course, that Ara and Marianne are married in the red brick church. The treatment is vague, even going so far as to note, any other complications will be worked out later. One of the most frequent complaints by reviewers of Saroyan's plays, even many of his short stories, was the lack of plot. In fact, every review in major publications of the original run of My Heart's in the Highlands mentioned that there was no plot in the conventional sense. Often, Saroyan wrote character sketches more than stories, and this was clearly meant to be exactly that. Engel's letter was apparently written after Saroyan made a phone call to 20th Century Fox, speaking to Engel. In his reply to that initial letter, Engel wrote, "Frankly, I can't find in these 5 pages enough story for a feature-length movie. Granting that you have in mind a simple, earnest picture, free from a lot of plot and gimmicky contrivances, yet I'm sure you will agree that it is mandatory, even in a picture with a considerable number of songs, that the book itself is not thin and slight." Saroyan had never worked on a musical, and would never write one in his career, although did allow his theatrical works, Hello Out There and The Man with the Heart in the Highlands, to be adapted in the operas. An important part of the notes we found is the lineup of writers. William Saroyan, Ross Bagdasarian, and Archie Manassian. While Ross and Willie had written the song, Archie was as close as a brother to William, and at times exceptionally close to Ross, especially at the time when Ross and Saroyan weren't getting along. William often tried to get Archie work writing, including helping him shop around plays and stories. The fascinating thing is that even in such a brief, nebulous treatment, there are a great many details that clearly anchor the story within Fresno that the cousins grew up in. The Red Brick Church refers to the Holy Trinity Apostolic Church on Ventura in downtown Fresno. Built in 1914, it has been a gathering point for the Armenian community ever since. The Old Country Bakery could be one of several lavash bakeries in town, with the great possibility that it being modeled on the bakery where Archie had worked as a boy. The treatment mentions Guggenheim's packing house, another location that Saroyan has written about in works like Places Where I've Done Time. Even the empty lots he mentions, William had done chapters about in that same book. In such a confined amount of textual space, the treatment has the flavor of Fresno. It's clear that this wasn't a priority for Saroyan. In the early 1950s, Saroyan started writing more and more, selling more and more stories to major magazines, and was about to switch his longer-form writing to autobiography and memoir. Ross would appear in a few films, but at the end of the decade was focusing almost exclusively on music and singing, and in 1958 would release The Witch Doctor, and then 8 months later issue the first Chipmunks record, the Chipmunks song, Christmas Don't Be Late, and both of which went to number one and established Bagdasarian as a major player in the music industry, although under the name David Seville. Interestingly, Archie had his third child within a week of the final letter. So why didn't this get made? Saroyan went to the mattresses for almost 2 years to get The Time of Your Life made. But why give up so quickly on Come On to My House? There are likely a few answers. The first is that Saroyan was going through a lot in his personal life, including his second divorce from Carol Marcus. Ross was acting and was working on his recording career, while Archie was a busy family man, though still getting poetry published. Another factor would have to be the relationship between Ross and William. The two had a falling out in September of 1951, and they dissolved their creative partnership. In the Saroyan Letters at Stanford is a contract outlining exactly who owns what of their songwriting output, with the two agreeing to remain co-authors of Come On to My House and another song they wrote called He Says, while parceling out the various other songs to one or the other, with Saroyan gaining custody of Eat, 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 which would later be published by Duchess and recorded by Danny Kaye. The letters between the two show that both agreed that dissolving their songwriting partnership was the best idea, though in early 1953, the two were again communicating about getting movie and TV deals together. As the 1950s move along, Saroyan was clearly aware that there was money out there, and he seemed to understand that the real money was not only in providing scripts, but in owning the brand, being a public face, and producing the material himself. Saroyan's idea, which oddly both worked and did not work, was to produce a series of 13 plays as his own television series, The Wonderful World of William Saroyan, sometimes referred to as the William Saroyan Playhouse, which will be the focus of our next episode, and then 4 after that, which will show where the 13 plays he produced ended up. Thank you for listening to Saroyan on Screen. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.